and a big warm welcome back to the Colour Wheel Garden YouTube channel. I cannot believe already how many wonderful people have already subscribed, and I really hope you enjoy what I share with you. I hope it's useful, and I'm really excited to kick things off today by sharing with you a simple 6-ingredient arrangement that you can make at any time of the year, including right now in the middle of November. Now, for myself personally, I only like to use flowers that I have either grown myself or foraged with permission. Now, I know for a lot of people they will also import, but I actively encourage you, if you do import, to look at local flower farms or even consider growing your own, because for me personally, I believe flowers should be as green as possible and part of nature. And what I'm starting off with this super simple 6-ingredient arrangement is a lovely dish. Now, I got this from the charity shop for £5, and it's a wonderful Royal Dalton casserole dish, and I think it's gorgeous. It's got this great beautiful belly, and I do love a belly on a container, and most importantly for me, it's got a lid. Now, I've taken the lid off, but the reason I like dishes that come with lids is because it has a lip. Now, if you, like I, want to be as sustainable as possible, you want your mechanics to either be completely reusable or completely compostable. Now, a lot of people will use chicken wire, and if it doesn't have this lip, they'll need to secure it in place using florist tape, which isn't really too bad in comparison to something like floral foam, but it still isn't compostable and it isn't reusable once it's used. Whereas if you find a dish that has a lip and you do use chicken wire, which of course you can then reuse, you can scrunch it up and get it underneath that lip and nice and secure without needing additional tape. So I often do that with things that have a lid, or a lip I should say. But today we're actually going to create something using no mechanics. Well, we are, but the flowers are going to be our mechanics. So something like this, if I were to take a calendula and I was to just place it in like so, it's just going to fall to the side, and I could go and go and go and go and go, fill my vessel with loads of stems, and they would be tumbling and falling out, and it wouldn't look like an arrangement. So that's why something like chicken wire is great, because if you can imagine those little holes you get, if you fold it over, it acts as a placeholder for your stem, so it doesn't have as far to lean or fall. But how are we going to create that without chicken wire? Well, in the middle of November, something we all have in our gardens, or a lot of us have, is wonderful, glorious sedum. Now, at this time of the year, it's super faded, dusky pink, this one here, but I don't mind that because most of this is going to be covered up, and I'm all about celebrating the seasons. If things are dusky at this time of year, I'm going to go with it. Now, as you can see, I've cut these super short. They almost look like the heads of broccoli. And what I'm going to go in with is my simple stems of sedum. Here you go. I've got about a handful there. And if I count them out with you, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stems of sedum. And this vessel is about a handspan width. So that gives you a rough idea of what we're working with size-wise. And all I'm going to do with my sedum is plonk it in. Look at that, couldn't be easier. And of course now, if I go back and I get my calendula, I'm just going to make sure they're all facing the right way. One of them's fallen upside down. But look how simple that is. This is going to act like that chicken wire or that floral foam, but of course, not only is this completely sustainable, it's completely compostable. And if I now take that same calendula stem and I plonk it in here, it stays upright because the sedum has acted like that mechanic that holds it in place, but you don't have to worry about this not being sustainable. Now, that's ingredient number 1. We've only got 5 ingredients left. So I'm going to go in with something else that is super accessible, and this is wonderful, wonderful borage. Now, I work for Higgledy Garden, which is a cut flower seed company, and I can tell you I have grown every single seed in the Higgledy Garden catalogue, and borage has to be by far one of the absolute easiest, one of the longest flowering. Of course, the flowers are edible, so if you wanted, you could freeze them in little ice cubes and look all posh and fancy to your friends when you have a dinner party, and the bees go bonkers for it. So it's a real winner chicken dinner. And it's super easy to grow, but it also makes a great cut flower. Now, some people do find it goes floppy. All you have to do if you find that is sear the stem ends just for 10 seconds in some boiling water, and what that will do is it will expand the stem, it will encourage more water to get up it, and if you do find you have the odd floppy stem, it will make it rigid. But what I personally tend to do is I tend to cut my stems and plunk them straight into cold water, and I arrange the next day with all the ones that are rigid, which for the most part is 3/4 of them. Now, dead simple, all I'm going to do is plonk them in. It's really as simple as this. It will come together. So if you imagine that you were doing a garden design, you might think about your understory being your lowest plants at the bottom or the front of the garden. And then you might think about your middle story that would then come up slightly higher, and then your upper story, so your tallest plants at the back. And in effect, that's kind of what we're creating here. We've got our sedum as our lower story, but in this case, it's wonderful nesting foliage. That's what I'm treating it as. I'm treating it as nesting foliage. It's a term I kind of like to use when I think about lower squatting foliage, and it doesn't always have to be necessarily short foliage. For instance, dill, it has a wonderful kind of umbellifer shaped, that's kind of when it's like that broccoli shape or that lace shape. It's got an umbellifer shaped head, but if you cut it short, it makes wonderful nesting foliage. So there you go, you can steal that term because that's what I use. I don't know if that's correct by the floristry books, but that's what I call it. And you can see I've added this borage. Now I promise this will all come together, but we've got our lower story and we've got our middle story. So that's 2 of our ingredients, and you can see how that borage was just so easy to plonk simply in that sedum, because that sedum holds it upright. It's a bit like, I got this from wonderful Catherine of Fierce Blooms, and if you don't follow her, you definitely should. She often talks about supporting her flowers a bit like, you know, if us ladies need a little bit of support, we get a bra. And it's the same with the flowers. If you have something that just gives it that support, it helps keep everything nice and perky. And so often you can use that with maybe some stems around the edge that are a bit more hard and upright if you worry about things flopping. But right now the sedum's doing an excellent job. So what I'm going to go in next with is wonderful calendula. Now this is Calendula Snow Princess. Some people call it Calendula Ice Maiden because of how white and cool it is, but Snow Princess is what it's often known as. And again, I've got this from Higgledy Garden. And again, you can just see I'm going to place this just where it feels right. Now this is where you get to have your artistic play. You might like to have things poking out a bit. You might like to have everything super neat. One important thing is I'm going to ensure I strip my foliage, because you don't want any of that foliage going into the water. And the reason you don't is it adds bacteria and it shortens the vase life. But these are so super cheery. I mean, you wouldn't think this is the middle of November. It's just a super, super cheery bowlful of flowers that you can add on your bedside table, in your hallway, on your mantelpiece, wherever tickles your fancy. And you can go with whatever you have in your garden. So if you start to look at the ingredients and you think, what have I got that could act as nesting foliage? Maybe you've got a hebe, something evergreen. What can I go for something that's a bit more upright in its foliage? Maybe you've got a privet, or maybe you've got a jasmine. What can I go with that's got dainty flowers? Maybe you've got pansies right now, or other bedding plants. And now I'm going to add just a few, bless them, they're on their last legs, but of the dahlias that I've cut back. But just insert them. And these I'm thinking of as my focal flower, and I'm thinking of this as my supporting flower. So again, you might think, well, what have I got that instead of a dahlia? You might have a chrysanthemum. You might have a hebe that's still holding on to some flowers, although admittedly that's a bit more of a spike. But you go with what makes your heart sing. And when I think of a focal flower, I think of something that's taking up big retail space. It's kind of hard to ignore a focal flower. They're very look at me, dramatic queens, fantastic, lovely, lovely, wonderful flowers. And I'm just willy-nilly, this is super, super simple. I'm going so slow, but I could do this much faster, just to show you how easy it is if you want to get a little bit of colour, a little bit of joy from your garden. And I find for myself, weirdly, even though we're in abundance in flowers in summer and spring, it's actually winter that I crave it the most, because of course it's soggy and it's cold and it's dark outside, and that's when I want to scoop up a little piece of the garden and bring it inside. And that's what I'm kind of trying to create here, a little piece of a garden, so I don't have to go outside in the puddles and the sludge to see that cheery joy. And all of those tiny little blooms all of a sudden become so special, because of course they're more sparse right now. So we've added in our nesting foliage, our kind of more upright foliage with the borage, but of course these could be classed as something else. The sedum could be a lace, this could be a spike or a texture or bell or a magic element. We've added our dahlias as our main focal flower and our calendulas as our supporting flower. Now I'm going in with another foliage here, and this is wonderful cardoon, but you could class this as a spike. Spikes typically are things like foxgloves, you know, those beautiful tall spires, or salvias with those long tips, but you might want to use at this time of year something like persicaria, or if you do have some salvias still standing, or another type of foliage. I think take a pinch of salt with this and just give it a go. Figure out what shapes you like, what colours you like, what you have accessible in your garden, and just go with it. And I've only got 3 little stems here, and I'm just adding 1 at the back to give it a little bit of height, and 2 on the sides. Simple as that. But you could, if you wanted, you could have them all together. I quite like that actually. You might want one over here, sprawling out the side. But now I've seen it, I quite like this one. So I'm going with mine just up here. And again, for me, it's because I'm trying to create a piece of that garden. It really brings together that lower story, middle story, upper story for me. Not too upper, but just enough. I've got a few little ones actually here, so I'll add them in at the front. But it's so easy. I mean, I'm doing this from behind and I'm literally just inserting them, because that sedum's doing all that work for us. I mean, it's so easy. And then lastly, I've got wonderful Ammi. Now this is Ammi Visnaga. You have Ammi Majus and you have Ammi Visnaga. And Ammi Visnaga just comes out that bit later. Now it's just starting to fade and go a slightly brown, but I really like it. I think it adds an antique-y element. Now this is definitely a lace. It's that umbellifer. But again, if you wanted, you could use this as your nesting foliage. Now, some people like to have their lace sat in amongst them. Some people like to have their lace upright and poking up. Go with what makes your heart sing. But for me, I'm just plonking them in, looking at that camera, because obviously I can see you, and saying, oh, I like that. And I'll probably tweak with it a little bit after we filmed. But on the whole, this is just bringing me joy. And it's a lovely activity to do if you can find that you've got 15 minutes just to arrange it, 15 minutes of considered thought. You could pick them the day before, let them sit in water. You don't need anything fancy. I'm just using little glasses to keep them in, and then just arrange them the next day. It just needs to be 15 minutes one day, 15 minutes another day. And that's honestly if we're just going slow and really taking our time and enjoying it. If you want to do it quick and you're really in a rush, you could absolutely whack this out in 5 minutes if you wanted. But where would be the joy in that? I think you want to consider flowers and you want to really have that connection with them, because like I say, right now it's not the time we want to be getting in the garden. So this is our way of coming into the garden, and those are our 6 ingredients. I mean, it's as simple as that, but you can imagine that on a lovely hallway table when you enter your house after a really dark, soggy day, and it just brings you some cheer. Or you can imagine it on the mantelpiece, or next to your bed, or in the bathroom, wherever you wanted it. And it hasn't taken long. It's proving that you can get, even in the darkest depths of winter or late autumn, some wonderful colour. And for me, this is all about creating a mini garden in a vase, scooping a piece of it up and bringing it in whilst it's all dark outside. So tell me if you have a go. And if you do, what ingredients do you use? What ingredients do you want to put together? What do you have in your garden right now? Because it would be wonderful to see and hear what you create. But I hope you enjoyed this. I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day, and have a little bit of creative time if you have the opportunity, which I appreciate we don't always. But if you can carve out 15 minutes, I highly encourage you to just scoop up a piece of the garden into your house. TTFN, ta-ta for now.